Good morning, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful day. We continue where we left off, 17b. And the Gemara concluded that Rabbi Yehuda changed his mind. In the beginning, he held that liquids become impure, contaminated, and they can impart contamination, transmit it, both to food items and to vessels. But then we learned that Rabbi Yehuda changed his mind. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda changed his mind, and he holds that he makes a distinction between liquids, if it touches the outside of the utensil, then the inside is pure. If it touches the inside, the outside is pure. Because since it's rabbinic, liquids contaminating a utensil is rabbinic, and therefore the rabbis wanted to make a distinction to remind you it's only rabbinic. So if the truma becomes impure, don't burn it. You're not allowed to burn it, because since biblically it's pure, you're not allowed to burn pure truma. So you have to wait until it spoils or rots. So we see clearly that liquids, according to Rabbi Yehuda, does not contaminate utensils. And earlier we learned it does contaminate utensils. The Gemara says he changed his mind. He revised his opinion. Question is, what did he change his mind to? Did he revise his opinion and now he's on the same page as Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, that liquids do contaminate, but they only contaminate food or other drinks, but not food, but not utensils? Or he completely changed his mind. Now he holds, like Rabbi Meir, that liquids receive impurity, but they do not impart impurity. That was the question that he asked. And now he's going to bring a proof. Tashma, second line from the bottom. Yiboilu, we asked the question. Mikelu, the other way.
Is the whole concept of liquids that they can accept Kabbalah Tuma but not impart Tuma. That's the whole machlokes, right?
That's a Meir's opinion, right? Rabbi Meir holds, and Rabbi Yossi and Shimon said no, they also impart impurity, but only to food. And Rabbi Yehuda said no, to everything. And now the Gemara says no, Rabbi Yehuda changed his mind. The question is, what did he change his mind? Now he agrees with Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, or maybe even a step further. Now he agrees with Rabbi Meir, it only receives impurity, it cannot impart, it cannot transmit impurity. That's the question. He boiled it. He only changes his mind that the liquid cannot impart impurity, transmit impurity to utensils. But food, he holds like Rabbi Yossi with Rabbi Shimon. Perhaps, maybe he completely changed his mind. Once he's changing his mind already, maybe he's on the same page as Meir that liquids only receive impurity, cannot transmit impurity. Rabbi Nachman said, Tashma, I'll bring you a proof. The second line from the bottom, 17b. We learned the Braisa, an ox that drank mechatas. Mechatas is the water that was prepared with the ashes of the red heifer, with which you sprinkle someone who came in contact with a corpse to purify. So if a par drank this mechatas, right? Now an animal, the Torah says that if you touch the mechatas, you become impure. But a living creature cannot become impure. The animal, while the animal is alive, even though it swallowed this drink, this mixture of the wellspring water with the ashes, but the animal cannot become impure while it's alive. The only creature that becomes impure when he's alive is a Jew. No other creature, when you're alive, you can't become impure. But when the animal dies, the water is still in its stomach. It's within the first 24 hours, so it's not fully digested or transformed into blood. The water is there. So he says, Psara Tameh. Now the flesh of the animal became impure because it has the water of the nida in it, and it's touching the flesh, the meat. So this meat, it doesn't matter if it's sacred or not sacred, this meat is even regular meat, the butcher shop. This meat is impure. Rabbi Yehuda argues. Rabbi Yehuda says, Batlu b'meyeha, the water is completely nullified in the stomach. So therefore it can in the intestines. So therefore it can no longer contaminate. Because it's no longer considered, it doesn't have the name and the status of the water of the chatas. question is, okay, so Rabbi Yehuda's argument is you can no longer call it mechatas. It doesn't have that status of this holy water. It's a mixture of the ashes of the red heifer and the smells are fine. But if Rabbi Yehuda holds that liquid in general, he concedes to Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon that liquids not only receive impurity, but they impart impurity. But he concedes Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon only imparts impurity to other food items, not to utensils. So at least the meat should become impure, even if it no longer has the status of a mechatas, but it's liquid that's impure. So firstly, the liquid touches itself. So the liquid is impure, and the liquid should impart impurity to the meat. So why does Rabbi Yehuda argue and say the meat remains pure?
Well, we said, because he's saying...
No, the liquid is there. You can't say the liquid is not there. So it doesn't have the status of mechatas, but the liquid is intact, and the liquid touches itself, so the liquid is impure.
From what angle?
Because it didn't lose its impurity. Why would it lose it? Why would it lose its impurity? You say it doesn't have the name of mechatas, doesn't have the status of mechatas. Fine, but
mechatas has ashes in it. Which
yeah, special. But the liquid is impure. The impurity didn't go anywhere. It's still intact. We're talking about the first 24 hours. It's still intact. It wasn't absorbed in the blood. It wasn't. So it's intact, and now the liquid should transmit the impurity to the flesh, to the meat.
Maybe it's nullified the minute it's swallowed.
I mean, if you hold like Rabbi Yisrael Shimon, you should say Tana.
Yeah. In other words, why? What do you mean? The liquid is there. You can't, the only thing is, when it comes to mechatas, the Torah says it has to be protected. So once the animal digested, this mechatas is no longer it's no longer protected. So you can no longer use it. You can't say, oh, let me extract this water and sprinkle it on the person who's impure. No, I can no longer do that. It's no longer considered mechatas because it wasn't protected. Once the animal swallowed it, it's gone. It's finished. Now the animal died, the water is still there. I can't just take this water and let me sprinkle on the person who came in contact with it. So as the status of mechatas is lost, but the water is intact. The fact is the water is here. So if the water is impure, why can't the water transmit the impurity to other food? If you're going to say that he only revises his opinion, he changed his mind that water cannot transmit impurity to utensils. But regarding food, now he's on the same page as Rabbi Shimon that the water could transmit the impurity to food. Why do you say the water is nullified in the intestines? Yes, it does not have the strict impurity of a mechatas, because that status is lost. But at least the liquid is present to extent, therefore it's impure, and that should contaminate the meat. But the Gemara answers, no, it's not a proof. I'll tell you what Rabbi Yehuda means is, my batlu b'meyeh, nami batlu mituma chamura. He's only saying that because the mechatas, when the Torah says that mechatas, the water with the ash, has the power to contaminate everything that it touches, that includes utensils. So that's what he's saying. That status is gone. So the water can no longer contaminate the utensil. But meat, yes. Food, yes.
So he wasn't really arguing, he was more clarifying the statement of the Tanakama.
Right. No, Miklal the Tanakama suffers. You're going to tell me the Tanakama holds Tumachamudinami mitama. The Tanakama holds not only does it contaminate meat, it also contaminates the arguing about whether it contaminates utensil or not. The Tanakama doesn't even mention utensils. Tanakama says that it contaminates the meat. The meat of the animal is now contaminated. And Rabbi Yehuda is arguing about the meat. He said, who's talking about utensils? And the Gemara Kula Rabbi Yehudi, the whole B'rais is Rabbi Yehudi. And this is how you're supposed to read. You're supposed to read the B'rais. It's missing words. an ox that drinks mechatas, the meat is tummy. Yeah, and then you slaughter the animal. The meat is tummy. Come in contact with the water, and the water transmits the impurity to the meat. Only the meat, and not doesn't have the power to contaminate, to transmit the contamination, the impurity to vessels. Because Rabbi Yehuda says, "Batal b'meyeh." The status of mechatas, of the water, of the red heifer, the ashes, that's gone. The moment the animal drinks the water, that's gone. So it doesn't have the power to transmit the impurity to utensils, but it's still a liquid. The liquid is still here, so it transmits the impurity. So the meat itself of the animal is impure.
Now, isn't it in mechatos? There are ashes of paraduma?
Yeah.
So maybe it's tmei mace also?
No. Firstly, it's burnt. It's completely burnt.
Okay.
Firstly, it was slaughtered. The animal was slaughtered. It wasn't an
It's a
avela.
carcass, isn't
Wasn't an avela. No, if you slaughter an animal, it's only an avela, a carcass. If you slaughter an animal, it's not tummy. And every carbon in the base of things we thought, right? Rashi says, Rashi explains, Le'elam batal mi'el legam. Really, Rabbi Yehuda, I'll answer your question. Rabbi Yehuda, the literal meaning is that he's arguing about the meat. That even the meat is torn. Why? Why is the meat pure? If Rabbi Yehuda agrees with Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon that the water could transmit impurity to food, why is the meat pure? So he says from the Havale Mashke Sarua, because it's like a liquid that's gone bad, that smells. So therefore, it's no longer considered liquid. Not only does it lose the status of a mechatas, it's no longer considered liquid at all. When the Torah says that liquid in a vessel is impure, it's only liquid that you can drink. No one is going to drink water that was in the stomach of a cow, in the intestine of a cow. No one is desperate enough to drink that water. It's like it's that water is gone. It's not considered beverage. Period. So it's not considered a beverage at all. So it cannot impart any impurity. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. But in principle, real beverage, if it's beverage, if it's not stinky, then he agrees with Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shimon that it does impart impurity to food items, even though not to. He revised his opinion that it doesn't transmit it to utensils. So it's no proof from it. Now we get back.
What does it mean by they're saying here in this particular, that the meat will be of a lesser impurity? The cow swallowed the
No, the first answer was that the meat, but not utensils. Now he's saying even the meat
has some degree of.
Even the meat is pure, because the water is not. It loses its status as liquid. Period. Since it becomes smelly liquid and putrid liquid, no one's going to drink from it, so it's no longer considered a beverage. So it has no power to impart any impurity to anyone, even to the meat. Okay. Now the Gemara goes back to the Braisa. We learn Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon said, when in doubt, if the liquid touched and contaminated, so li'oichlin tamei. If it's to other food items, which biblically the liquid has the power to transmit, so then it's a doubt, a biblical doubt. Whenever a biblical doubt, you have to be strict. It's in the private domain, so tamei, and you say that it's tamei. But lekalim. But if the doubt is whether the contaminated liquid touched utensils, which then it's only rabbinically impure, because biblically liquid doesn't have the power to transmit impurity to utensils. So any rabbinic question, even if in the private domain, we're lenient. That was their opinions. Rabbi Yossi is following in the path of Rabbi Akiva's Rebbe. Rabbi Akiva, all of his 24,000 students died out. He only had 5 students left. Who were his 5 students?
Maybe they drank the water.
Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai,
Yeah, right.
Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Lazar ben Shamua. So this Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So he says Rabbi Yossi is following in the opinions of Rabbi Akiva. Why you say only Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai also is a student of Rabbi Akiva. But he's saying Rabbi Yossi because he's going to say later on Rabbi Yossi himself doesn't agree with the opinion. He's just quoting the opinion of his Rebbe. This is Rabbi Akiva's opinion, but he disagrees with his Rebbe. Rabbi Shimon, however, agrees with his Rebbe. So he says this is the opinion, it's not his own opinion, it's Rabbi Akiva's opinion. The Darish, Rabbi Akiva learned Yitma Yitame. Rabbi Akiva learned when the Torah says Yitma, the way we read it Yitma. It itself is impure. But the way it's written, it could read Yitameh. It transmits impurity to others. And that's how Rabbi Akiva read it. You have to read it the way it's written, Yitameh. Now, we learn in the Mishnah and Saita, in Rabbi Akiva. That very day when they impeached. When they impeached Rabbi Gamliel, and they appointed Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, so he opened up the Beis HaMedrash and they increased all the students. And that day, they explained everything that was difficult, and they made a whole tractate just on what happened that day. Idias, all the discussions of that day that was discussed and clarified with all the rabbis. They never had such a day. So that very day, Darish Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva taught. Darish Rabbi Akiva, the beginning of every Masechta has the most commentaries. As you get further on, it grows less and less and less. So there's nothing like the beginning. It's very powerful, the first day. It says, any earthenware that becomes contaminated, right? Let's say a rat, a mouse enters into the atmosphere of the earthenware pot. So the vessel becomes impure. And it says any food that's in there, tameh. So ain't tameh. It doesn't say that the food that's in the pot becomes tameh. Eli tameh, ached. The food now in turn has the power to further transmit the impurity onward. So limit this comes to teach us akika sheni, a second bread, that could transmit it to a third chulin, because the pot itself is a sheni, right? This sheretz, the dead mouse, is a rishon. Right. The Torah says that only food items in the pot become impure. Why only food items? Because we don't consider as if the whole pot is filled with a sheretz, as if the sheretz, the dead mouse, touched anything that's in the pot. If it would be considered as if the dead mouse touched everything in the pot, even though physically it's not touching, then why does the Torah say only food items are in the pot that's contaminated, even utensils? Because the dead mouse is a source of impurity and it has the power to contaminate even the utensil. Torah says only food item. So the way it works is, the Torah says that a earthenware is unique. It's not like a metal utensil. A metal utensil, the only way to receive impurity is by touching the metal utensil itself. Earthenware does not become contaminated. It's not the touch, even if it's just in the air. It's just in the atmosphere. It's just hanging in midair. Right, it already contaminates the utensil. But the utensil is a secondary. The utensil is like the first level of tumah, the child of tumah, the offshoot, secondary. Right. Then the food that's touching now, that's in the utensil, now becomes the second level, the vlad, the grandson of impurity. And since the Torah says yitameh, that now this food item, which is a sheni, has the ability to further transmit the impurity to a third, so we see that any food item that's a sheni could further transmit it to a shlishi. And the Torah is not talking about food that's sacred or food that's truma, any food. So Rabbi Akiva holds that there is this transmission up until a shlishi, till like a great-grandchild of the impurity. The sheretz itself, the dead mouse, is the father, is the source. And then the child, the offshoot of that is the vessel. Right. The offshoot of that is the food. And the food further carries and transmits the impurity to the next food item that it touches. That's already a great grandchild of the father. The third degree. So Rabbi Akiva holds that even chulin you can transmit it, including a third degree. Of course, we don't follow that opinion. We say chulin only goes 2 degrees, and it stops right there. It weakens. It doesn't have the power to transmit it. Only truma could become a shlishi. And kodesh, sacred food from the sacred meat, could even become any kodesh could become even a revi.
Right.
But Rabbi Akiva says yitame. The way he reads it is yitame. So therefore, So also over here, that we say, V'hacha heiche gedarish. So Rabbi Yosef, it takes Rabbi Akiva, and this is how he's going to darshan. B'chol mashke sheyis, b'chol keli yitma yitame. So he'll also read it when it says in the verse that any liquid that you drink in the vessel becomes tameh. So you read not only yitma it itself becomes tameh, but also yitame. It further transmits the impurity. So liquid, with this we learn. Rabbi Yosef follows the opinion of Rabbi Akiva that the liquid has the power to transmit the impurity to other food. If a liquid touches food, the food now becomes biblically impure. You're saying that liquid only has the power to transmit the impurity to other food items. Maybe even liquid. You're telling me liquid not, food yes, liquid not. The liquid cannot make another liquid impure. It could only make another food impure. Where do you know this from? The Gemara says, like loy kachoya. Loy kachoya. This is not the way it was.
Not correct.
It's not the way it is. Why? Papa means we don't find anywhere in the Torah that food can contaminate food. So liquid cannot contaminate liquid. So when he says you transmit it further on, it must mean the liquid could, if it touches food, the food now biblically becomes impure, but not other liquids. Ravina says, no, migufa l'kra, from the verse itself I can learn that. Migufa l'kra nami le'matzas amnit yitma l'tamitumas mashkin. I can't say the verse means that the liquid becomes impure to transmit the impurity to other liquids. Why? This sefer l'tamitumas mashkin, if the second time, the Torah says twice yitma. So if you're going to tell me that the second yitma is coming to teach me that the liquid transmits the impurity to other liquids, yitma dereisha nami l'tamitumas mashkin. So then also the first yitma, it says twice in the pasuk yitma. It says mikol ha'oichel sheyachar yavelav mayim yitma, v'chol mashke sheyishasav halkel yitma says twice. So why does the pasuk have to say twice yitma? Yitame, to teach me that liquid makes other liquids impure. Narvinu v'nachtavinu, he should just say once yitma. Let him mix the two together. Mikol ha'oichel, any food asher yachar sheyavelav mayim. Today yitma lamali. Why do I need twice yitma? Ella yitma dereisha l'tamei tumas mashke. The first yitma is coming to tell me that the yitma, that the mashkin is itself impure.
Through food.
What?
Through food.
So what are we saying?
Oh, in other words, the food, in the beginning we're talking about food.
Right.
So the food is telling me the food, yitma, yitame, the food touches the liquid. And then he says, so that's why he has to repeat it. Why does he have to repeat twice? Because he has to come to teach me the food only contaminates liquid and the liquid only contaminates food.
But not food to food.
If
or
food,
liquid to
if
liquid,
food
right?
and liquid both contaminate food or liquid, then you can just say once. All the food and the liquid that become impure.
Right.
Not only do they themselves become impure, they impart the impurity to any other food item or liquid. Doesn't matter, liquid to liquid, food to food, or food to liquid, or liquid to food.
But that isn't
Since he
so. It's not
separates it,
liquid to
right?
liquid.
Since he separates it, the Torah is clearly telling me that's why he has to separate it. That food only contaminates liquid, and liquid only contaminates food, and that's why he doesn't mix it.
Right, okay, gotcha. So no food.
Yitame dereisha l'tamei tumas mashkin, that the food contaminates the liquid, and yitame deseifa l'tamei tumas eichel, that the liquid contaminates food. The Gemara, wait a minute, it's not a proof from the verse itself. Let me say, l'tamei sakel. Maybe the reason why the Torah says twice yitame And I couldn't say it together. If he would have mixed it together, really, I'll tell you, food or liquid contaminates other food or other liquid. It doesn't matter. It's not only food to liquid or liquid to food, even liquid to liquid and food to food. Why then doesn't the Torah mix the two and say it once yitma? Why does he have to separate it? Because I would think, maybe the second time is coming to teach me that it even contaminates the utensils, like Rabbi Huda's original opinion, that the liquid also can contaminate even a utensil. That's why he has to teach me an extra yitame. Not only does really food and liquid are the same. And that makes sense, logically. Food and liquid are the same. If food can contaminate liquid, why can't food contaminate food? And if liquid could contaminate food, why can't liquid contaminate other liquid? What's the logic behind it? The Torah would only have to say it once. He says another time to teach me that the liquid also contaminates even utensils. Liquid has the power to contaminate even utensils. And he says, "V'lav."
That's kind of strange because we dump our utensils in the keli big there, right?
So Gemara says, "No, I wouldn't need a pasuk to tell me that." V'lav kal v'chaymeru. I can figure that out on my own. One of the 13 principles how you derive things from the Torah.
Right.
What's the kal v'chaymer? Uma keli shemetame mashkin.
Just as a vessel transmits to liquid.
Uma kal v'chaymer. And the kal v'chaymer is like this: Ma keli shemetame mashkin, ein metame keli. The earthenware, right?
Right.
That contaminates the liquid.
Right.
The earthenware cannot contaminate another utensil. The Torah says clearly only a food item that's in the utensil, in the earthenware, becomes impure, not keli. So the keli, the utensil, cannot contaminate. It contaminates the liquid, but it can't contaminate a utensil. Mashkin aboyim achmas keli, the liquid that becomes contaminated from the utensil.
Right.
It's an offshoot of the utensil. It's another degree, a diminished degree of impurity.
Okay.
Ain't it dinshlo yitamas hakelim? So surely it's not going to be matama the kelim. So that's how we know. That's how we know.
It's a funny kavachayim because we're saying each thing doesn't atomic kiyetsu so okay.
No, so in other words, I can't say the pasuk is coming to teach me. I can say the pasuk is coming to teach me that yitame that it contaminates even utensils. It's impossible. It's not logical. It makes no sense. It goes against the kavachayim. Tells me it's not so. How is it possible? The Torah tells me the earthenware, which is the first thing that becomes contaminated from the dead mouse,
Right.
cannot contaminate another utensil, but it could contaminate the liquid. The liquid, which is a diminished, it's a grandson of the dead mouse. It touched the utensil. You're telling me that yitame at the Torah is telling me that liquid can now contaminate utensils? It makes no sense. So therefore, we must learn that the Torah is coming to teach me that liquid only contaminates food, and food only contaminates liquid. Food cannot contaminate other food, and liquid cannot contaminate other. Wait a minute. Let me say, maybe you're right. Liquid that became contaminated from the utensil can't be stronger than the utensil itself. If the utensil, which is the source of impurity of this liquid, cannot transmit impurity to a utensil, surely the liquid that became contaminated from that utensil doesn't have the power to transmit the impurity to another utensil. Fine. But maybe the Torah is teaching me yitame, that liquid that came in contact with a dead mouse directly, not through the keli. Maybe liquid does have the power to contaminate another utensil. Utensils not, but liquid yes. And that's what the second yitame is coming to teach me. So how do you know the second yitame is coming to teach me that liquid only contaminates food, and that food only contaminates liquid? Food cannot contaminate, cannot transmit the impurity to other foods, and liquid cannot transmit the impurity to other liquids. No. Maybe the extra yitame is coming to teach me that liquid is special, liquid is unique, liquid has the power to transmit it even to a keli. Yes, not the liquid that's impure from the utensil, but liquid that's impure from direct contact with the sheretz and the dead mouse. Okay. Then that liquid now has the power to transmit not only to other food items, Because liquid could contaminate anything, food, other liquids, but even a keli.
I'll
We're
reject
saying
that.
mashkin can't be metal mashkin.
No, but how do we know? No, but Avina says we know this from the pasuk. From the pasuk, I don't know this. How do you know that? I'm the, hey, but let's take a look. Metam mashkan boy machmas kela. Mashkan boy machmas shel toch name the metam mash. Fact the mother mashkan boy machmas mixivi. The pasuk is not talking about that. The pasuk we're talking about liquid that became impure from the earthenware. From being in the earthenware. So we're talking about liquid that became impure from the utensil. And you're telling me yitame, that the Torah is telling me that this liquid now has the power to contaminate and transmit the contamination, the impurity to another utensil? It's not, in our case, it's not possible. Because it's coming from the utensil. The utensil itself doesn't have the power to contaminate another utensil. Surely the liquid that's contaminated from the utensil doesn't have the power to impart that impurity, transmit that impurity to another utensil. How do we know in general that a liquid that touches a dead mouse imparts impurity? That we learn from we don't learn that from a kal v'chomer. If liquid that becomes impure because it was touched by the earthenware has the power to transmit impurity, yitame.
Contact with the animal, right?
So liquid that touches the dead mouse directly, surely it has the power to transmit. So therefore, dayim and adin lias kinidin. So therefore, you can't, since you have to learn it from a kal v'chomer, the pasuk doesn't say it clearly. The pasuk says clearly is talking about liquid that touches the keli. Liquid that touches the sheretz, we only learn that from a kal v'chomer. When you learn anything from a kal v'chomer, you have a rule. It can't be, what you learn out, a priori, can't be stronger than the source. So the source, dayim and adin lias kinidin, just like in the source that you learn it out from. The Torah says yitame, only other food or liquid, not utensils, because it can't be stronger than the keli, it can't be stronger than its source of impurity. The source of its impurity, the earthenware, cannot transmit it to another utensil. Surely when the Torah says yitame, that the liquid it cannot it transmits impurity, but it cannot transmit it to other utensils. And so you learn out, you derive from there, liquid that came in direct contact with a dead mouse cannot be stronger than that, so that liquid also does not have the power to contaminate, to transmit the impurity to another utensil. So therefore, since I have two yitame, so the two yitame, Ravina says, comes to teach me that food only can transmit it to other liquid, and liquid can only transmit it to food. Not liquid to liquid, and not food to food. The Gemara says, Yitme de Reisha. When it says in the Reisha, it talks about food. Yitame. Heichadorish. How do you learn it? So you have to say also, Yitame means to other liquid. The food can transmit impurity to liquid, not to other food. How do you know this? Maybe Yitame, that food has the power to transmit impurity even to a utensil. In other words, same question. Maybe I'll tell you really, and that's logical. It makes no difference. Food or liquid can contaminate other food and other liquid. Liquid to liquid, food to food. Why not? I asking why does it say twice yitame? You know what? Maybe the second yitame is coming to teach me that food, yes, liquid you already clarified. You can't say that yitame, liquid has the power to contaminate utensils. That's off the table. But maybe the food has the power to contaminate a utensil. Yitame means keli.
Wait, sorry, isn't this pasuk Mikolei Chashayech Lashayav Mayim Tami? Didn't we learn from here that hechsher, that water has to go over in order for the food to be makabel tuma? Isn't that the translation of that pasuk or not?
No, we're talking about it in the earthenware. It's a different pasuk.
This pasuk that we're saying here
is in the earthenware. The
Kol
earthenware.
Chashayech Lashayav Mayim.
Yeah. Kol Eichel.
That they just quoted. What does that mean?
Yeah. Yeah, but Yitma, you're talking about the food. The food itself, Yitma, becomes impure. If this food, the Shayavel of Mayim, which had a Hechsher, yeah, it has to have a Hechsher. It had a Hechsher. The food itself is Yitma, and we read Yitame. The food has the power now to transmit impurity. So maybe say the extra yitame. The question is, why didn't you just say once yitame? Mix it all together. Food or drinks. It's metame, other food or other drinks. Doesn't matter. Food to food, drink to drink, drink to food, the liquid to food. It doesn't matter. Why the extra yitame? Maybe the extra yitame is coming to teach me that food touches a utensil, does have the power to contaminate a utensil. So he said, how do we know this? Ein el tamis akeli. So Hammer, the Gemara answers, no, kavochem. Ma mashke, shemetame yoichel. Ein metame keli. Liquid that has the power to transmit impurity to food. The liquid cannot transmit it to a utensil like we just learned. Oichel, she'ein metame yoichel. Food which cannot contaminate, which cannot transmit it to other foods. Ein additionally yitame keli. How do we know that food does not contaminate other food?
General rule that you can't.
It's a rule. Yeah, it's a rule.
That rule, the rule alone should make the Kabbalah go away.
Right, that rule alone, because now, if food cannot transmit it to other food, liquid could transmit it to other food, and yet liquid, even if it touched a dead mouse, cannot transmit it to a utensil. How much more so the food, which is lesser than the liquid, the food does not have the power to transmit the impurity to a utensil. So what does it mean yitma? Who? So yitma could only mean one thing: to transmit the impurity to food, food to liquid, just like liquid to food, food to liquid. That's it. Why? Because liquid is stricter than food. Why is liquid stricter than food? Food cannot transmit it to other food, but food could transmit it to other liquid. Why? Why? Because food needs to be qualified before it's susceptible to impurity. It has to become moist first. Liquid doesn't need any qualification. It's already qualified. It's moist. What do you have to give me a reason? Yeah, there's nothing left. I must say that yitame means I have to transmit it to something. So you said utensils as out of the picture. I can't transmit it to utensils. You said other food, you can't. So what's left? There has to be mashkin. Why are you giving me a reason? The reason I'll say it's mashkin because I don't need any reason. The Torah must mean liquid because there's nothing else. There's nothing else left. When it says yitame, who does the food transmit the impurities? Not utensils. You said not. Other food not. So it must be mashkin. Why do you have to give me a reason?
That's what Eliyahu was going to tell us.
There's nothing else.
Eliyahu was going to tell us exactly.
This is what he means. This is what the Rabbi says. If you're going to want to say, oichel chama, the metame mashkin, nitame lekeli. If you're going to say that food is stricter, because food could contaminate liquid, liquid cannot contaminate liquid. Food could contaminate liquid, so maybe food should contaminate a utensil. You said that no, if liquid could contaminate food, and nevertheless liquid cannot contaminate utensil, food that cannot contaminate food, how much more so that food cannot contaminate a utensil? But maybe say no. The reason why liquid cannot contaminate a utensil, because liquid cannot contaminate the liquid. But food that could contaminate liquid, you see, it's stricter than liquid. So maybe food could contaminate the utensil.
That's why the Kavachomer is a funny Kavachomer. There's a side reason why each one is not being metame each other. There's a side rule. It's not really built into the...
Okay, we have to see what the rule is based on. Why is it a simple thing that food cannot contaminate food? So he says, that's what he says, no. The reason from the mashkin, you know why food could contaminate liquid, even though food cannot contaminate other food? It's not because food is so strict, food is so powerful. No, it's because liquid is so strict. Because since liquid doesn't need any qualification, any preparation, it's automatically susceptible. That's why it easily receives impurity, not because of the power of the food. On the contrary, it's the power of the mashke. So then we remain with the kal v'chomer. If mashke, which is so powerful, it could transmit the impurity to other food. Food cannot transmit the impurity to other food. So mashke is more powerful. And even the fact that the food can contaminate liquid is because of the power of liquid. Because liquid is much more susceptible to impurity. And nevertheless, liquid cannot contaminate the utensil, transmit it to the utensil. How much more so food doesn't have the power to transmit impurity to a utensil. Ma'u ali lusan. What do you mean it's olul, it's more likely, more susceptible to impurity? It doesn't need any preparation, any qualification. And spiritually speaking, impurity, when there's moistness, when a person is dry, if your Yiddishkeit is dry, your whole life is dry, then you're not susceptible to impurity. You're dead. Mold only comes where there's warmth and there's life so impurity is only attracted to where there's moistness, where there's life, there's vitality, there's fresh, alive. If you're dead and dry, you're not susceptible to impurity. You need a little moistness in your life, a little.
It sounds like an upside of being dead and dry.
Well, no, but Tumma tells you
You're alive.
Tumma tells you you're alive. Someone said, I'm only going to eat food that worms eat. Worms don't go. The food can sit in the supermarket, sit there for years, and the worms won't touch it because it's not food. You can't lie to the worms. The worms go after organic food, good, real food. That's food. That's where the tumma is attracted to. The impurity is only attracted with his life, with his vitality, with his. And that's why the woman's impurity is double of a man, because a woman she's the source of life. She's much more alive. She's much more connected to godliness, and that's where the impurity is attracted to. Okay, Yitame. Fragt die Gemara, Yitame den neuesten Kayetzim auch in Nafke? Is this where we learn Yitame that you don't make that food does not contaminate food? Is this where you learn it from? Because it says twice, Yitame is coming to teach me that food only contaminates liquid, and liquid only contaminates food. That's why it has to say twice. Is this where you learn it from? We learned it elsewhere. It says, it says earlier, that if the nevela, if the dead carcass falls on zera, on plants that are already harvested and that had water, it was moistened after it was harvested, and then that carcass falls in it becomes tameh. So who tameh? The food becomes tameh. You cannot transmit it to other food items. So I already know that. Why does he have to say twice yitameh? So the Gemara says, I need two psukim. I need the Torah to teach it with me twice. Why? Chad, once b'mashkin aboyim machmas sheretz, that liquid that comes in direct contact with the dead mouse, that liquid cannot contaminate other liquid. Chad b'mashkin aboyim machmas keli, and liquid that became contaminated from the earthenware, from the utensil, that it cannot transmit it to anything like it, liquid to liquid. It has to be liquid to food, and likewise, food to liquid.
We said before it's a kal v'chomer, right?
A what?
We said before we learned it from a kal v'chomer.
No. How do you know not food to food and not liquid to liquid? So that, because it says twice yitame, that was the source. Because it says twice yitame, it should have said once. So since twice, it means to teach me that only food to liquid and liquid to food. What it says, why do you need another time to teach me? Because I need to teach me that liquid, I would think if it only said once, and maybe liquid that comes from a utensil. So it's a secondary, it's a lesser degree of impurity. Maybe that liquid doesn't have the power to impart impurity to other liquid. But liquid that came directly in contact with a dead mouse, maybe that liquid does have the power to contaminate other liquids. That's what he says. Tamehu, that no.
So the beginning of Almond, we said that we learned it from a Kal V'chomer, which is Dayim. But I guess now we're saying it actually has its own pasuk. Either way, it would come out the same limbo. Okay.
No, we learned from a Kal V'chomer that mashkin. No, what do we know in general? What do we know in general? It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that liquid that touches a dead mouse is impure and could impart impurity. It doesn't say anywhere. The Torah tells us liquid that's in the earthenware that has a hanging mouse in the earthenware, and so the earthenware contaminates the liquid. But how do I know that liquid that touches the mouse directly is impure? But it's a Kal V'chomer. The Torah doesn't have to tell me. If the Torah tells me that liquid that's in the earthenware, how much more so? But he says, Dayim and Adin, that just like there cannot contaminate the utensil, also here it can't contaminate that. But how do I know it can't contaminate other liquid? There I can make a distinction.
Just for Kieran, okay.
You're asking, why don't you say Dayim?
No, but
If the whole liquid you learn from a utensil, so if a liquid from a sheretz you learn from a utensil, so why don't you also say diet? That just like over there, liquid cannot contaminate it. Because he also has to teach me about food. It's not just liquid. How do I know also food? Oh, 1 second. So, so 1 second. So let's see. The Gemara says I need both. Why do I need both? Because mashkin that comes from keli, it's a second degree. It's not as strict. So therefore there it doesn't have the power to impart impurity to other liquids. Liquid could impart impurity to other liquids. That's the Tzlach asked that question. He says, understand. Why don't you say Dayim and Adin? He asked that question. Why do you need another pasuk? Dayim and Adin, Lias Kinidin. The whole tumma of liquid that touches a shet, like you might have said in the beginning. We learn out from liquid that touches the utensil. So say Dayim and Adin. Just like over there, we know liquid cannot contaminate liquid, so it's enough. The Tzlach doesn't have an answer. Maybe the other answer is Eisen Akash. Very good question. So the Gemara said, okay, so the Gemara says, the Gemara asks, Lishmina mashkan boy machzor. Let the Torah teach me liquid that comes from sheretz. But kolshke mashkan boy machzor keli. The Torah could only teach me once in the case of a liquid that touches a dead mouse, and then I would know already how much more so if liquid that touches dead mouse directly cannot impart impurity to other liquids. How much more so liquid that becomes impure from the utensil, from the earthenware, how much more so it cannot impart impurity. Everybody says, you're right, I don't need it twice, but it's something that you can learn out from a Kal V'chomer, so the Torah can teach it to me again. It's not a big deal. Tamehu, it's not adding one word, it's not. The Torah would bother and repeat it again. Now the Gemara says, now the Gemara is going to ask, Amalei Ravina Ravashi. Ravina said to Ravashi, Lo Rabbi Yesi Savik Rabbi Akiva. Ravin said, Rabbi said, look, Rabbi, you saying, Rabbi said that Rabbi Yesi is following in the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, but the Rabbi said, look, Rabbi Yesi Savak Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva Savak Rabbi Yesi. Rabbi Yesi doesn't hold like Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva doesn't hold like Rabbi Yesi. Amalei, answer Rabbi Yesi, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi. You're right. Rabbi is right. Rabbi Yesi disagrees with his teacher. When he said in the Braisa, Rabbi Yossi, he wasn't saying his own opinion. He's stating his Rebbe's opinion. This is Rabbi Akiva's opinion. And we'll stop over here, and tomorrow we're going to learn, the Gemara says, where do you see...
What's the argument?
Where do you see... Yeah, what's the argument? And where do you see Rabbi Yossi doesn't agree with Rabbi Akiva? Where do you see that? And Rabbi Akiva doesn't agree with Rabbi Yossi. Where do you see that? So he's going to quote Braises to prove that they argue. Even though in this Braisa he's quoting his Rebbe's opinion, but he's saying it as a Rebbe's opinion, not his own opinion. Because Rabbi Shimon agrees with Rabbi Akiva. So that we'll explore tomorrow. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.